Humans, they'll cower at the first sight of battle, barked General Zerks of the Galactic Council, scoffing at the newly arrived humans, who had yet to step onto the wardled terrain. The council chamber buzzed with an amused murmur. Sash's statement hung in the air, solidifying what every alien race believed about Earth's inhabitants, soft, peace-bound creatures who stumbled into galactic warfare with the caution of a frightened animal. But the humans just stood, recall unflinching. Earth species began, Counselor Breen of the sorriest slender silver-skinned figure, with a voice like running water. We appreciate your willingness to assist in this conflict, though we fully understand if you find it to overwhelming the human at the front of the group. Lieutenant Mason Coles aimed to suppress a smile. Overwhelming, you're talking about facing off against the Drawn Empire. Hesked, his tone casual. Generals, your scales rippled in irritation, turning a bright shade of violet. The Drawn warriors are relentless here, torted. They show no mercy, and the Fawns withdrew after a single engagement with them. What makes you believe humans, Sunna? Yarmord flesh-bound as you would fare any better. Lieutenant Cole paused, eyeing the council members as if sizing them up. His voice is steady and even filled the echoing hall. We've done our homework, General has said, and we've handled worse. A wave of suppressed laughter rustled through the assembly. The notion of humans, small, squishy beings by galactic standards, braving the drown, a species notorious for their brutality and unmatched combat skill, was ludicrous to the Galactic Council. These humans were nothing more than fragile bones covered in a thin layer of skek, and they lack their enforced exoskeletons of the granny or the reflexive scales of the Xerath claws, Notoxin snow armor that grew from their own bodies. Their evolutionary shortcomings made their survival improbable in this theater of wars. Lieutenant Cole continued, unfazed by the quiet ridicule. What's the current situation with the Drawn? Zerks narrowed his eyes. They're advancing on 3 of our outpost planets. So our forces have been contained in all directions. Their artillery surpasses ours, their troops far out number any of our species' best efforts and nigh. Owl looked down, his nose at Colescale's darkening in what appeared to be angry. You really expect to make a difference. The human officer just gave a single nod. That's exactly what we expect. What precisely are you plan to? Inquired Counselor Breen, her expression one of patronizing curiosity. Lieutenant Cole's grin broke out, then unsettlingly wide. We'll start by sending a small squad. We'll like to make sure we understand our opponents before we go. And Breen tilted her head, frowning in confusion. Linsoy, you're merely testing the Drawn. That sounds like a wreck. I prefer a massacre. Caller raised a finger. See, that's the difference between use and most of the council. Here we don't charge into battles blind, but when the time comes, we do go all in and we don't hold back. Sai's patience was thinning fast enough. With the cryptic responses, do you really expect your small numbers to hold any ground against the Drawn? Snapped, scales flaring again. Another human stepped forward. Captain Eli Brooks's glinting with a mischief that the alien delegates struggled to interpret. The Drawn haven't faced human warfare yet. The said you're about to witness tactics unlike anything you've seen before. For the Galactic Council had convened in the Hall of Decisions to discuss possible tactical maneuvers, but the human seemed had their own ideas. General Z exchanged glances with Counselor Breen. The Tsar's metallus eyebrows twitched as she suppressed as murk. This will be over quickly, she muttered. Humans are a novelty at best. Captain Brooks continued, ignoring the dismissive looks. In about 3 days, you'll hear back from our squad, and when we've got the lay of the land, we'll show you why humans don't back down. When it counts. An uncomfortable silence followed. The human had walked right into a death trap and still spoke with this strange, unnerving confidence. He exhaled, clawed, hands tightening at this side. You've been warned. The Drown will not show mercy. They do not negotiate. They do not leave survivors. I hope you understand what lies ahead. Oh, we understand. Brooks replied with a level tenue. We've encountered our share of stubborn enemies. The council members resumed their seats, satisfied that they had at least tried to dissuade the humans from a course that would most certainly end in their annihilation. But as the humans exited the chamber, there was a lingering sense of unease. The way they walked, steady and unfazed, clashed starkly with the narrative the council had written about them 3 days. Later, a broadcast crackled through the Galactic Council's communication network. General Zix, already convinced that the humans had perished, received the transmission with an indifferent sigh. General ZX here, sir, came the human voice, calm as a breeze. This is Lieutenant Kohler, reporting from the outpost. XY's widened. He scrutinized the communication screen, expecting to see a plea for reinforcements or a list of casualties. Instead, Lieutenant Cole appeared looking a bit dusty, perhaps a little roughed up, but nothing like what he had expected from an encounter with the drone. We've assessed their ground for Foresser. Cole continued, not missing a beat. Our initial estimations were pretty accurate. They're clustered around their supply depot, and it seems they haven't encountered guerrilla tactics before. ZX blinked. Guerrilla tactics, yes, sir. responded, "We've been moving in smaller units, destabilizing their supply lines, cutting off reinforcements. They're not responding well. XY scales darkened with disbelief, and how many of your forces were low? Kolechek something off-screen lost none general, but the drown have lost quite a few. Their command structure is surprisingly brittle once you get under their exoskeleton, so to speak. XY's jaw dropped. You're telling me you managed to destabilize a drawn front line without reinforcements? We do have reinforcements, sir. Cole said, flashing that uncanny human grin. But we haven't needed them yet. Just thought you'd appreciate an update. The screen blinked off, leaving Zarek staring at his own reflection, his face a mask of incredulity. 3 hours after Lieutenant Cole's message, the Galactic Council convened in a frantic emergency meeting. The hollow screens displayed endless streams of data from the human skirmishes against the drone columns of enemy forces, strategically isolated and neutralized with astonishing precision. Alien delegates from every species watched in bewilderment as data continued to scroll by, indicating human success in areas previously deemed unwinnable. General Zix had not moved from his seat since receiving the first update, his claws dug into the table. Asha struggled to process the information. How is this possible? Hem muttered, staring blankly at their reports. Counselor Breen, seated beside him, tilted her head, eyes narrowing with curiosity. They have not psychic shields, no ADVA. Said weaponry. They're using basic kinetic projectiles and explosives. She pulled up a close-up feed of a human soldier in action, leaning behind cover, firing shotgun bursts, directing his comrades with handsignals. This makes no sense. As she whispered before she could analyze further, a voice crackled through the council's secure line. This is Captain Eli Brooks reporting live from Drowned Territory. He announced, his voice calm and clear. Cirques leaned forward. Captain Brooks, your forces have made an impact. Care to explain? The hollow display shifted to show Brooks dressed in worn battle gear with the remnants of drone fortifications smoldering in the background. His face was dusty, but there was a satisfied gleam in his eye. Well, General, let's just say the drawn aren't big on adaptability. They've got a rigid hierarchy, and once West started dismantling their chain of command, the rest fell apart pretty quickly. He gestured behind him at the scattered drawn remains, their armor cracked and useless. Turns out they rely heavily on centralized orders, and without their officers barking instructions, they don't enlp. Reassuring, well, Counselor Breen interjected, sounding equal parts fascinated and horrified. You're telling me you've destabilized an entire battalion with just a handful of troops? Brooks shrugged. We've had some practice back on Earth. Guerrilla tactics, ambushes, coordinated strikes on supply lines. Humans can be well resourceful. Under pressure, Xy's jaw clenched as she processed the implications. Captain, are you aware that the drawn have not been defeated in over 200 cycles? Brooks gave a casual nod. Yeah, we heard that, but back on Earth we faced tough odds before you could say it's a bit of a tradition for us to take on the impossible tradition. Breen showed bewildered, where is that tradition for humans? The alien delegates exchanged glances, uncomfortable murmurs. Filling the room, Six's gaze narrowed as she scrutinized the human on the screen, as though he were seeing an entirely different creature than the one he had dismissed a few days ago. Before Sex could respond, another flashed across Consol's hollow screen. It was a live feed from the second outpost, where another small group of humans had engaged a drawn garrison. The footage showed the humans moving through dense forest terrain. Using the undergrowth for cover, appearing and disappearing like phantoms, they set traps, cut off escape routes, and executed maneuvers with a precision that was unnatural. Xy's claws dug deeper into the metal tablet. They're operating as if they're in their own territory. Brooks, watching the same feeds, murked, one thing we humans learned a long time ago. Generalish, how to turn the environment into an ollie. The drawn may have advanced weapons and more soldiers, but we've got flexibility. Breen was silent, their silver eyes fixed on the screen. Flexibility, she repeated, almost tasting the unfamiliar word. And your losses? Brooks' smile faded. A few injuries, no casualties. The room went silent. Every Legata stared at Brooks. The data, the drawn, infamous for their brutality and skill in battle, were being held back, beaten back by human soldiers who weren't even equipped with the most advanced bonds in the galaxy. Zeke's mind word calculations, scrambling to find some logical explanation. Your tactics, she began, are beyond anything we've seen, yet you've been using technology that's practically ancient. How can you possibly hold ground against them with such limited resources? Brooks looked away, as if weighing his words. General, sometimes it's ought the gear that matters most. To turn back, his gaze steely. It's the person using it. The quiet confidence in his voice was like a slap in the face to the council members who had long measured military strength by technological superiority. Their understanding of warfare, of superiority and subjugation, was unraveling, replaced by a disturbing realization: humans didn't just fight. They adapted, they anticipated, they exploited the weaknesses of their foes. And then, with the precision of a surgeon's knife, they struck another alert chimed through the chamber, and hollow screens flickered to reveal a new message from Lieutenant Cole. His face was strime, his expression relaxed yet sharp. Lieutenant Cole here reporting from the northern perimeter. He said, giving a quick salute. Cole's eyes burst out, "What's your status?" Cole chuckled. "We've been playing tag with the drawn scouts all morning. They tried to encircle us, but they're just a bit too slow on the uptake. We LED them into a series of obstacles. We set up last night obstacles." Breen's eyes widened. "You're using the terrain," Cole nodded. "It's a bit of a bidding Earth conflicts. We learned early on that making the environment work for us gives Susan edge, especially against foes who rely on numbers." Sirit shook his head in disbelief. "You set traps among other things," Cole replied casually. "We've also been raiding their supplies." Turns out the drawn don't dow empty stomachs. Counselor Breen's metallic brows furrowed our expression of deep concern, crossing her usually stoic face. "You're saying you're starving them?" Cole's grin widened. "Strategy maw. Like a Zed, we've got a few tricks." A poor sleeve Zix could feel his scale sprinkling with frustration, his confidence in the council's superiority. Fraying, he opened his mouth to argue, but the final image on the screen stopped. Hemet was a drowned war camp, its defenses abandoned, the ground littered with fallen soldiers, and standing amidst the chaos were humans calm, calculated, surveying the aftermath as thought they were already planning their next move. Breen turned slowly to ZX, her voice barely a whisper. "They aren't afraid of." There she searched for a word and settled somewhat reluctantly on one that didn't sit comfortably on her alien tongue. "They're good at it." ZX barely heard her, his mind still grappling with the impossible. Captain Brooks's voice crackled through the comms. Once more, a hint of something dark in his tone. "We'll keep you updated on the next steps. General, this isn't over yet, but I'd start preparing your post-battle reports if I were you." And with that, the screen went black, leaving the Galactic Council staring at each other in silence. The Galactic Council sat in silence long after the comms link went dead. The chamber felt colder, smaller. Their reports continued to pour in from the battlefield, detailing human victories, with an accuracy that bordered on surgical. As the council members reviewed each update, the initial scoffs of disbelief had given way to something far more unsettling: respect and a deep gnawing fear. General Zex glanced up at the other council members, his expression more strained than they'd ever seen. "We underestimated them." Hem uttered the words, tasting bitter. "The humans are not just participants in this war. They are professionals." Counselor Breen nodded slowly, her usual calm replaced by a nervous energy that seemed to ripple off her silver skin. "And what if they decide to turn their sights on us? When this is over, before anyone responds, a new communication lit up the screens. This one marked urgent. The Galactic Council delegates, who had been steeling themselves for another human transmission, were surprised to see a drawn soldier wildly on the screen. "This is Commander Takovadran, High Command," he began, his voice barely masking his desperation. "To any council members receiving this, if you can hear me, pull back your forces. You must end this." Zera blinked in astonishment. The hadn't a drawn officer plead for anything in his entire career. T continued, his eyes darting as though he were checking for someone. Ching over his shoulder. "We were not prepared for these." These humans stammered, tremblings lightly. "They're like shadows striking where we least expect them. They dismantle our strategies with terrifying ease. Our soldiers are deserting. Morale is collapsing." Had Ruragged breath. "If this continues, there will be nothing left of the drawn forces." Counselor Breen's eyes widened, and she turned to Zerx. "They've broken." The Zerx nodded slowly, a look of profound realization dawning on his face. "And yet they keep advancing." Just then a new figure appeared on the council's hollow screen. Captain Eli Brooks, looking composed despite the dust and grime clinging to his uniform behind him. The council could make out rows of human soldiers. Preparing to board transport shuttles, Captain Brooks Zerx began, trying to regain his composure. "We've just received a communication from the drawn commander. They seem to be requesting our intervention. They want us to stop the fighting. Perhaps it's time we consider a ceasefire." Brooks raised an eyebrow, a humorless smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "A ceasefire? They've had centuries to consider one. Now that we're here, they want to back out." Sire exchanged uneasy glances with Breen, then turned back to Brooks. "They're clearly no match for your forces, Captain Webb. Believe it would be prudent to allow them the opportunity to negotiate." Brooks's gaze hardened. "Oh, we've given them plenty of opportunities. Every time we ambushed a battalion or sabotaged a supply line, we left a clear path for surrender. They refused. They chose this path." The council chamber was deathly silent as Brooks' words sank in. "The humans weren't there for conquest or glory. They were here to end the conflict, and they were relentless in pursuing that end." Captain Breen said, her voice a touch softer than usual. "Aerial humans, as skilled in warfare as you, Our team Brooks let out a small chuckle, though his eyes remained serious. Not all of us, but enough to ensure that when humanity commits to something, we don't stop halfway. A ripple of unease passed through the council. Zerx cleared his throat, struggling to hold on to his authority. Captain Brooks, we may be able to arrange for the Drow's unconditional surrender, a permanent solution. Surely that satisfies your objective. Brooks's gaze means unblinking. We came here to end a war. If surrender a choice, will accept it. But the Drow need to understand that you don't tolerate half measures. When Bree nodded, hastily activating the Council's emergency communication line. With the drawn commander, Stra's face appeared pale and desperate as she absorbed the news. Yes, yes, we surrender. Her has almost cracking. We surrender entirely. Whatever terms the humans demand, we will comply. Brooks leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Disarm your forces and pull back from every occupied territory. Abandon your siege engines and weapon caches. Acknowledge the Galactic Council's authority over all disputed sectors and understand that if you betray these terms, humanity will remember. Tax wallowed, nodding frantically. It will be done. The drawn empire yields as the transmission faded. The silence in the council chamber was profound. The alien delegates, once convinced of humanity's weakness, now looked on them with wary respect and a myriad of fear. These humans shadden the unthinkable. They'd broken the unshakable will. Counselor Breen looked at Captain Brooks. Captain, you've not only saved our alliance, but you've shown us a new face of warfare. Your species, you've changed everything. Brooks gave her a nod, his face devoid of the usual satisfaction of a victor. The galaxy is a tough counselor. We just make sure we're tougher with that. He cut the communication, leaving the council in stunned silence. The drawn forces retreated, their centuries-long dominance shattered in a matter of days. Words spread rapidly across the galaxy. Stories of human ingenuity and tenacity whispered in hushed tones from one star system to the next. Humanity was no longer seen as the soft species.